The man with the gold watch laughed too loudly, and the sound cut through the terminal like a blade dragged across glass. Vincent Calderon caught it mid-step. Not the laughter itself, airports were full of that, but the way it landed. Sharp. Deliberate. A sound meant to be heard by one person only. Vincent stopped just short of gate 47. The departure board flickered above, cycling destinations, delays, quiet disappointments. Boston. On time. He was early. Too early. He hated being early, it gave the past room to breathe. Across the gate, a woman stood alone. She wasn't causing a scene. That was the problem. No shouting. No pleading. Just stillness, rigid as if she'd been braced there. A carry-on rested against her shin like an anchor. Her boarding pass trembled in her hand. 3 men had formed a loose half-circle around her. Suits that tried too hard. Shoes too clean for this hour. One leaned close enough to invade her air. Another blocked the stanchion rope, casual, careless, as if he owned the space. The man with the watch wiped at his eyes, mocking tears. Vincent didn't move. Not yet. He scanned reflexively security cameras, angles, reflections in the glass. No uniforms close. No obvious law enforcement. That made it worse. Places without rules always did. The woman turned her head slightly, eyes fixed on the gate agent beyond the men. She didn't look at them. Didn't give them that. Her jaw tightened once. That was all. Vincent felt it then, the old calculation sliding into place, unwanted but precise. This had nothing to do with her. One of the men glanced over his shoulder and locked eyes with Vincent. Recognition didn't bloom, just assessment. A flicker. Then the man smirked and turned back, emboldened. That was the moment. Vincent stepped forward. Not fast. Not loud. He closed the distance with the patience of someone who knew exactly how much space he needed to take, and no more. "Gentlemen," he said. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The word carried weight simply because it was unnecessary. They turned. All 3. Up close, Vincent saw the cheap arrogance under the polish. Mid-level. Peripheral. The kind that fed off permission. One of them snorted. "You lost, old man?" Vincent smiled faintly, the kind that never reached his eyes. He didn't answer. He stepped past them instead, placing himself between their loose formation and the woman, just enough to break the geometry of it. He didn't look at her yet. "You're standing in a walkway," Vincent said, calm as an invoice. "Move." The man with the watch laughed again, louder this time, inviting an audience. Or what? Vincent finally looked at him. The laughter faltered. Not because of threat, there was none on Vincent's face, but because of certainty. The kind that didn't argue. For a heartbeat, the terminal seemed to lean in. Shoes squeaked. A suitcase rolled by. Somewhere, a boarding announcement droned on, indifferent. Vincent waited. The man stepped back first. Just half a step. Enough. The others followed, grumbling, peeling away, as if they'd suddenly remembered somewhere else they needed to be. They didn't apologize. They didn't look back. Vincent watched them disappear into the crowd, committing nothing to memory he hadn't already stored. Only then did he turn. The woman was staring at him now, surprise breaking through the tight control she'd been holding. Her eyes were red, but steady. She didn't thank him. Didn't explain. She simply shifted her bag out of the way when he gestured. "Gate's clear," he said. She nodded and stepped forward, past him, reclaiming the space as if it had always been hers. Vincent should have walked away then. That was the rule. Intervene if necessary, disappear immediately. No names. No threads. Instead, he stayed where he was. The gate agent scanned the woman's pass again, frowned, typed something, then waved her through. Just like that. No apology. No acknowledgement of what had happened. The woman exhaled slowly as she moved down the jet bridge. Vincent felt the ripple start before he heard it. A low murmur behind him. A few curious glances. Phones lifted, then lowered. Nothing viral. Nothing dramatic. Just enough attention to be noticed by the wrong kind of people. He checked his watch. Still early. Still time. Too much time. As he turned back toward the lounge, his phone vibrated once in his pocket. A message. No name. "You're sloppy tonight." Vincent didn't slow. He didn't reply. At the end of the jet bridge, the woman paused and looked back. Their eyes met again briefly. This time, there was something else there. Not gratitude. Recognition. Like she knew, without knowing why, that what had just happened wasn't finished. Vincent gave a small nod. A closure that wasn't one. Then she was gone. The boarding door closed behind her with a hollow thud. Vincent stood alone at gate 47, the noise of the terminal rushing back in around him, already calculating the cost of a line he hadn't meant to cross, and the quiet certainty that someone else had been waiting for him to do exactly that. Vincent didn't move from the lounge chair, even as the terminal crowd swirled around him like a tide of indifference. He rarely lingered after a situation like that, but something about her, the way she held herself even under pressure, kept him rooted. He lit a cigarette, the flick of the lighter loud in the otherwise muted space. Smoke coiled upward, blending with the stale scent of coffee and jet fuel. He inhaled slowly, exhaling even slower, counting the seconds until the burn hit the back of his throat. Focus. Clarity. Habit. 3 months ago, he had lost Luca, his youngest brother, over a poorly timed debt collection that had turned fatal in Newark. Vincent replayed the scene in fragments: a gun in the alley, a muffled scream, the smell of wet asphalt after rain. No one could fix it. No one could bring him back. Not even him. That loss had opened a door he didn't know he wanted to walk through, but each time he tried to close it, the memory clawed back. Power, influence, wealth, it didn't matter when the ones you loved were gone. That wound had never healed. It just bled quietly beneath the surface, shaping every move, every decision. Across the city, she was holding her own wound like armor. Nadine Clark, by the little badge tucked under her jacket and the worn name tag on her bag, had been working at the airport for less than a year. In that time, she'd lost her father to sudden illness, leaving her the responsibility for a younger sibling and crushing debts. The grief hadn't softened her, it sharpened her. It made her vigilant, aware, ready to step into roles she hadn't trained for but had no choice but to master. Both of them carried recent losses, each wound raw but contained. One was public and violent, the other silent, bureaucratic, invisible. They moved through the world with invisible scars that others couldn't read. The connection wasn't immediate. There was no spark, no magic moment. It was recognition. The kind of instant comprehension that comes from looking at someone and seeing a mirror of the grief you try to hide. Vincent leaned back, letting the smoke curl around his face. He thought about the boarding gate, the laughter, the arrogance that tried to shame her. He could have walked away. He had the option to leave it all behind. But he hadn't. Something about her had demanded intervention, demanded that his past grief collide with hers. Meanwhile, Nadine returned to the baggage area, checking her station, pretending she didn't feel the weight of his gaze follow her. She didn't know who he was, only that the man who had appeared between her and humiliation had saved her in a way she couldn't articulate. A stranger, powerful, dangerous, unnervingly calm, had seen her vulnerability and acted without waiting for permission. Their wounds were symmetrical in pain and timing, but not in expression. Vincent's grief carried the weight of authority and consequence, while Nadine's grief carried responsibility and survival. Both were isolated, both were cautious. Yet something threaded between them, invisible and electric. A possibility neither wanted to acknowledge. He imagined her checking the boarding gates again, her fingers tracing the worn edge of her ID badge, hesitant to trust anyone. She would notice subtle imbalances in the terminal crowd, the way people deferred to authority or stepped aside to avoid trouble. Vincent knew she would see him again if fate allowed. He didn't yet know that the next time he saw her, it wouldn't be in a public terminal where bystanders created temporary shields. The next time, the rules that governed her world and his would make them participants in something larger, binding, and unavoidable. For now, there was a pause. A calm before a storm neither of them could yet name. But in that pause, the story had begun. And with it, the unspoken agreement between two damaged souls. The wounded see each other. And when they do, nothing remains the same. Vincent Calderone didn't board his flight. He watched the final passengers disappear down the jet bridge, listened to the hollow click of the door sealing, then stood and walked the opposite direction, toward baggage claim, toward exits, toward the parts of airports built for people who didn't want to be remembered. He made the decision without ceremony. That was how most dangerous decisions were made. Outside, dusk pressed against the glass walls of the terminal, turning reflections into mirrors. Vincent adjusted his coat, rolled his shoulders once, and blended into the slow churn of travelers dragging suitcases and expectations behind them. His phone vibrated again. Unknown. You don't intervene unless there's a reason. Vincent typed nothing. He slid the phone back into his pocket and kept walking. There were reasons you acknowledged and reasons you didn't admit even to yourself. Nadine Clark clocked out late. The supervisor had forgotten to approve her overtime again. That happened more often than not. She didn't argue. She signed the sheet, collected her bag, and stepped into the employee hallway where the lights hummed and the walls peeled in tired strips. She replayed the moment at gate 47, not the men, not the laughter, but the stillness after. The way the space had shifted when the stranger stepped in. Like gravity had changed directions. She hated that she kept thinking about it. Being noticed usually came with a price. The employee exit spilled into the parking structure, where concrete swallowed sound and cars sat in long, exhausted rows. Nadine tightened her grip on her bag strap and moved quickly, eyes forward, keys threaded between her fingers the way her father had taught her years ago. Halfway to her car, she sensed it. Not footsteps. Not movement. Attention. She stopped. The structure echoed with distant engines and the drip of water somewhere above. Then a voice, measured, calm, cut through the quiet. You should park closer to the lights. She turned. Vincent stood near a column, hands visible, posture loose. He hadn't followed her closely enough to be obvious. He hadn't stayed far enough to disappear. She didn't relax. She didn't thank him. You again, she said. Didn't plan on it, Vincent replied. She studied him now without the pressure of an audience. The suit was expensive but understated. The watch real. The eyes older than his face suggested. A man who'd learned how to stand in places he didn't own and make them feel temporary. Why are you here? She asked. Vincent didn't answer right away. He glanced around the structure, cataloging exits, blind spots, angles. Old habits never rested. I missed my flight, he said finally. That wasn't the truth. It wasn't a lie either. Nadine took a step back toward her car. That's unfortunate. Yes, Vincent said. It is. Silence settled between them, not awkward, just alert. The kind that tested who would move first. I didn't ask for help, she said. No, Vincent agreed. You didn't. Then why step in? Vincent shifted his weight, the concrete scraping faintly under his shoe. Because those men thought no one would. That answer cost him something. He felt it the moment he said it. Nadine didn't respond. She unlocked her car, opened the door, then paused with one hand on the frame. They'll do it again, she said quietly. Not fear. Fact. To someone else. Vincent nodded once. They always do. She turned then, really turned, and met his eyes fully for the first time. Something passed between them, calculation meeting resolve. You don't look like security, she said. I'm not. You don't look like a good Samaritan either. Vincent almost smiled. Almost. Be careful who you let see you, she added. It tends to follow you. That landed closer to home than she knew. As she slid into the driver's seat and shut the door, Vincent stepped back, giving her space. The engine started. Headlights flared. Before she pulled away, she rolled the window down an inch. They were watching, she said. At the gate. I know, Vincent replied. She hesitated, then drove off, tires echoing through the structure until the sound disappeared into the city. Vincent remained where he was. From the shadows near the stairwell, a man lowered his phone. Across the city, another phone buzzed. And in a quiet office far from the airport, one with framed photos of men long dead and money long laundered, a decision was already being reconsidered. Vincent Calderone had been seen. And in his world, that was never accidental. By the time Vincent Calderone reached Manhattan, night had settled into the city like an old habit. The car he borrowed wasn't flashy dark sedan, clean interior, nothing memorable. He preferred it that way. Attention was a currency, and he'd learned long ago never to spend it carelessly. As he drove through the tunnels and up streets he'd known in different decades for different reasons, the airport replayed in fragments. Not the confrontation. The aftermath. Being seen. That was the mistake. He parked 2 blocks from the building, walked the rest of the way, and entered through a side door that required a code most people didn't know still worked. The elevator creaked as it climbed, stopping on a floor that no longer listed names, just numbers and silence. Inside the apartment, Vincent poured a drink he didn't touch. The place was curated restraint. No family photos. No personal clutter. Just art that suggested money without bragging, furniture chosen for durability more than comfort. The kind of home built for someone who expected to leave on short notice. He removed his jacket, checked his phone. 3 missed calls. 1 message. Unknown. You changed the temperature. People noticed. Vincent set the phone face down. He hadn't changed the temperature. He'd reminded people it could change. That difference mattered. Across the city, Nadine Clark sat on the edge of her bed with her work shoes still on. The apartment was small, 2 rooms, thin walls, a constant hum from traffic outside. Her younger brother slept in the next room, breathing steady, unaware of the quiet calculations that governed the space between rent notices and grocery lists. She replayed the parking structure encounter, not with fear, but with irritation at herself. She hated unanswered questions. The man hadn't asked for anything. That was what unsettled her. People always wanted something. Even kindness usually came with strings, expectations, leverage. He'd stepped in. He'd stepped away. And yet, somehow, he'd stayed. Nadine stood, moved to the window, and looked down at the street. Sirens in the distance. Laughter from somewhere below. Life moving forward, indifferent. She pressed her thumb against the glass until it left a faint print. She'd grown up believing character showed itself in private moments, what people did when applause wasn't possible. Her father used to say you could measure a person by the choices they made when they thought no one would remember. The man at the gate had remembered anyway. Vincent sat at the small dining table, paperwork spread out before him. Property records. Shell accounts. The quiet infrastructure of modern survival. This was where his authority lived now, not in violence, not in noise, but in leverage buried under legality. Still, his mind drifted. He saw again how the men had stepped back, not because he threatened them, but because they sensed consequence. That kind of authority wasn't loud. It was learned, accumulated, paid for over years. And he'd spent it on a stranger. Vincent exhaled slowly and stood, walking to the window. The city below looked smaller from up here. Manageable. Deceptive. He wondered, not for the first time, when exactly he'd started caring whether the people watching him understood why he did what he did. That was new. That was dangerous. Midway through the night, Nadine's phone buzzed. She frowned. No one texted her this late. Unknown number. Unknown. You were right. They were watching. She stared at the screen. No greeting. No explanation. She typed erased, then typed again. Nadine. So why tell me? The response didn't come immediately. When it did, it was short. Unknown. Because choices echo. She set the phone down, heart steady but alert. In that quiet moment, between messages, between certainty and doubt, she thought about the gate again. About the option Vincent had to walk away. About the option she'd had to look down, to shrink, to endure quietly. Neither of them had. And maybe that was the point. If you've ever been in a moment like that, where doing nothing would have been easier, safer, you know how loud the decision becomes inside your chest. Those moments don't announce themselves. They pass quickly. But they linger. Stories like this are built on those moments. And they survive only because people recognize them. Vincent's phone buzzed on the table. He picked it up this time. A new message. Different number. Unknown. We need to talk. You put yourself on the board. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. Instead, he opened his contacts, scrolled to a name he hadn't touched in months, and stared at it. Loyalty had a shelf life. So did silence. He closed the phone and poured the drink out into the sink. Tomorrow, he'd be asked to explain himself. Tomorrow, someone would test whether he still understood the rules. And tomorrow or the day after, Nadine Clark would learn that stepping into the light, even briefly, came with consequences she hadn't agreed to but could no longer avoid. Vincent turned off the lights and stood in the dark apartment, already aware that the balance had shifted. Not dramatically. Not yet. But enough that everyone involved would feel it, whether they admitted it or not. The meeting wasn't scheduled on paper. Vincent Calderone arrived anyway. The restaurant sat on a side street in Lower Manhattan that tourists never noticed, no sign out front, no windows you could see through, just a narrow door and a man who recognized faces better than names. Inside, the lighting stayed deliberately low, the kind that softened edges and hid age. Money had been passing through this room since before Vincent had his first suit. He nodded once to the host and was led past half-filled tables to the back, where a curtain separated dinner from decisions. 3 men waited. Not the top. Never the top anymore. Layers were safer. Smarter. The man at the center, Salvatore Ianiello, wore a gray jacket and no tie, projecting the modern version of restraint. He looked like someone's uncle who did consulting work and paid cash for cars. "Vince," Sal said, standing just enough to be polite. "You look busy." Vincent took the empty chair. "I wasn't invited." Sal smiled thinly. "You were expected." That was worse. Wine was poured. No one touched it. Sal folded his hands. "You disrupted a situation at JFK." Vincent said nothing. "Not violently," Sal continued. "Which is interesting. You didn't escalate. You intervened." Vincent leaned back. "That's a crime now?" Sal's smile didn't move his eyes. "Everything's a crime if it draws attention." Another man cleared his throat. "Younger. Hungry. Those guys weren't ours, but they were adjacent. Contractors. They filed complaints." Vincent's gaze flicked to him once, sharp enough to shut him up. Sal raised a finger, calming. "No one's accusing you of anything. We're adjusting." "Adjusting what?" Vincent asked. Sal paused, choosing the right lie. "Risk." Vincent nodded slowly. "Then adjust them." "Not me." The silence stretched. Plates clinked somewhere beyond the curtain. Life went on. "You don't get to decide that anymore," Sal said quietly. That landed. Vincent stood. "Then you should have led with that." He didn't wait for permission to leave. As he stepped back into the street, the night air felt heavier. Less forgiving. He checked his reflection in the darkened window of a closed shop, same face, same posture, but something had shifted. He was no longer operating in the margins. He was back on the board. Nadine noticed the envelope immediately. It was wedged under her apartment door, thick, unmarked, intentional. No stamp. No address. Someone had climbed the stairs, stood in the hallway long enough to slide it through. She didn't open it right away. She locked the door first. Then checked the chain. Then listened. Nothing. Inside the envelope, a folded document and a keycard. The document was a printout, employment records. Hers. Highlighted lines she'd never seen compiled like that before. Overtime disputes. Incident reports. Complaints she'd filed that went nowhere. At the bottom, a single sentence. "You are eligible for reassignment." Her stomach tightened. She sat down, keycard still untouched. This wasn't help. This was leverage. Her phone buzzed. "Unknown. You didn't ask for this." "I know." She typed back without thinking. "Nadine." "Then make it stop." The response took longer this time. "Unknown." "That depends on what you do next." She stared at the screen, anger rising, not panic. Anger meant clarity. "Nadine. I don't owe anyone silence." The typing indicator appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Unknown. Neither do I." She stood and paced the room, the document crumpling slightly in her grip. Whoever was moving pieces now wasn't clumsy. They were precise. They'd found pressure points without touching her directly. She thought of the men at the gate. Of the way they'd assumed compliance. She wasn't built that way. 2 days later, Vincent stood in a parking garage in Newark, watching cash get loaded into a van that technically belonged to a charity. Illegal sports betting had gone quieter in the last few years. Apps, offshore accounts, layers of insulation. Violence was bad for business. Visibility worse. But the numbers still mattered. Pennsylvania's tightening, the driver said. California's bleeding. New Jersey's holding. Vincent nodded. Shift the routes. Less volume. More patience. The driver hesitated. Sal won't like that. Vincent met his eyes. Sal doesn't carry the risk. The van door slammed shut. As it pulled away, Vincent's phone rang. This time, the number wasn't hidden. Connecticut. He answered. You made a choice, a voice said. Older. Controlled. Now you're forcing others to. Vincent said nothing. You're protecting someone, the voice continued. That's inefficient. Vincent leaned against the concrete pillar. So is threatening civilians. A pause. Then, almost amused, you think that's what this is? The line went dead. Vincent closed his eyes briefly. They weren't circling Nadine to intimidate her. They were circling her to measure him. That night, Nadine worked a different shift. Reassignment came without ceremony. New terminal. New supervisor. Same airport, different rules. She noticed the cameras immediately, the angles, the blind spots. She noticed the man who didn't look like staff, but stood too still near the coffee stand. When she finished, she didn't go straight to her car. She walked. She took routes with light, then darkness, then light again. She doubled back once, just to see who adjusted. Someone did. She stopped under a street lamp and turned. Vincent stood 10 yards away, hands visible, expression unreadable. You shouldn't be here, she said. I know, he replied. She crossed her arms. This wasn't part of the deal. There was no deal. That's the problem. They stood there, the city humming around them, both aware that lines had been crossed without signatures. They're using me, she said. They're testing me, Vincent corrected. That doesn't make me feel better. It shouldn't. She looked at him, really looked. You could have walked away. Vincent nodded once. Still could. But you won't. No. The words settled between them, heavy and irrevocable. In the distance, a car engine revved, then moved on. Nadine exhaled. Then tell me the truth. Vincent hesitated, not long, but enough. They don't like unpredictability, he said. And right now, you're unpredictable. She almost laughed. Almost. So are you, she said. Vincent didn't deny it. Above them, a light flickered. And somewhere not far away, someone was deciding which of them would be more expensive to break. They didn't walk together. That was the first rule Vincent didn't say out loud. Nadine stayed half a block ahead, moving like someone who had learned to navigate attention by minimizing it. Vincent followed at a distance that looked accidental. To anyone watching, they were strangers sharing a sidewalk. To anyone who mattered, it was a test. 2 turns in, Vincent confirmed it. A black SUV idled too long at a stop sign. Not surveillance grade. Worse. Contract curiosity. Someone told to look, not think. Vincent adjusted his pace. Nadine didn't look back, but she slowed just enough to let him close the gap. She'd noticed too. They stopped under an awning where rainwater dripped in uneven rhythms. Neon from a closed deli painted the sidewalk sickly green. You see them, Nadine said quietly. Yes. You didn't warn me. I needed to know if you'd adapt. She turned then, eyes sharp. I'm not a drill. No, Vincent said. You're a variable. That word almost did it. Almost made her walk away. Instead, she asked, how long? Vincent glanced at the reflection in the deli window. The SUV rolled past, slow, recording impressions. Since the envelope, he said. Before that, you were incidental. Her jaw tightened. She nodded once. Now your leverage. Silence pressed in. Nadine looked down the street, weighing exits, options, dignity. I won't disappear. I wasn't going to ask you to. Good. Because I won't perform fear either. Vincent studied her for a beat. This was the part people usually failed. They tried to bargain with power instead of defining themselves against it. Then you need context, he said. They moved again, this time into a parking garage, with too many shadows and a working camera only at the entrance. Vincent stopped near a pillar, choosing the spot deliberately. New York isn't what it was, he began. No bosses shouting orders. No open threats. Everything's quieter. Paper-heavy. Respect is measured in who doesn't get bothered. And I'm being bothered, Nadine said. Yes. Because of you. Because of proximity, Vincent corrected. They want to see if I'll bend. If I'll trade calm for compliance. She absorbed that. And will you? Vincent didn't answer immediately. He pulled out his phone and showed her something instead, an image of a property deed, layered through 3 LLCs, ending in a name she didn't recognize. This building launders money, he said. Legally. Perfectly. She looked up. Why show me this? Because in a week, there will be an anonymous audit, Vincent said. And when that happens, they'll expect me to smooth it out. And if you don't? They escalate. Not violently. Administratively. Transfers. Reviews. Problems. Her phone buzzed as if on cue. She didn't need to read it to know. They're asking for something, Vincent said. Nadine looked at the message anyway. Supervisor. We need you to file a clarification about the incident at Gate 47. Just routine. She laughed once, sharp and humorless. Clarification. They want a version that makes them comfortable, Vincent said. And what version makes you comfortable? Vincent met her eyes. The true one. That surprised her. Truth is inefficient, she said. Yes, he replied. But it's expensive to suppress. She paced once, then stopped. If I don't cooperate, they squeeze. If I do, I become useful. That's the trap. She looked at him steadily. And you? What happens if you protect me? Vincent's phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't check it. I lose ambiguity, he said. And ambiguity keeps people alive. Nadine nodded slowly. So this is where you walk away. This is where I choose, Vincent said. From the garage entrance, footsteps echoed. Someone pretending not to listen. Someone wanting to be noticed. Vincent stepped slightly in front of Nadine, not shielding her, just claiming space. Go home, he said quietly. Don't answer anything tonight. And tomorrow? Vincent's mouth tightened. Tomorrow, they'll ask for proof of loyalty. She held his gaze. From which of us? That, Vincent said, is the question. As she walked toward the exit, Nadine paused. I won't lie, she said without turning. If that costs you. It already has, Vincent replied. She left. Vincent stayed. From the shadowed stairwell, the watcher finally moved, phone lifted, message sent. He's involved. Vincent felt it settle in his chest, not fear, not regret. Commitment. And in a city built on lines everyone pretended were clear, he just stepped across one that didn't officially exist, but was enforced all the same. The summons didn't come with threats. It never did. Vincent received it at 6:12 a.m., delivered the way modern power preferred, polite, indirect, impossible to refuse. Lunch. 1 p.m. Madison Building. You know the room. He deleted it without replying. Across the city, Nadine stood in a restroom stall at the airport, rereading the email on her phone for the 4th time. Same tone. Same false courtesy. Internal review panel, clarification required. Attendance mandatory. 11:30 a.m. Mandatory was the word that mattered. She washed her hands longer than necessary, watching the water run clear, then shut it off decisively. When she looked up, her reflection didn't look frightened. It looked resolved. That worried her more. The room Vincent entered at noon had glass walls and no windows. A deliberate contradiction. For men waited inside, all dressed in variations of neutrality, expensive suits designed not to be remembered. No one stood to greet him. Vincent, said the man at the head of the table. We were concerned you might not come. You weren't, Vincent replied, taking the empty chair. You were curious. A faint smile. Fair. Folders slid across the table. Photos. Documents. Timelines. Gate 47. Nadine. An unfortunate complication, another man said. Your name surfaced adjacent to an internal incident. We'd like to make sure it's nothing more than coincidence. Vincent opened the folder but didn't look down. And if it isn't, he asked. The man leaned back. Then we adjust expectations. Whose? Yours. Vincent finally glanced at the photos. One was taken that morning. Nadine exiting the airport. Head up. Walking alone. You're asking me to withdraw protection, Vincent said calmly. We're asking you to step aside, the man corrected. She's an ordinary employee. Processes exist. Vincent closed the folder. Processes exist to protect institutions, not people. Silence. That, too, was data. At 11:29 a.m., Nadine was escorted into a room with 3 chairs and a recorder already running. No greetings. State your name, a woman said. Nadine did. Describe the incident. Nadine inhaled once. Then she told it exactly as it happened. No embellishment. No apology. No softening of edges. When she finished, the room felt colder. You understand, the woman said carefully, that your account places responsibility on individuals above your authority. I understand, Nadine replied. And you're comfortable with that? Nadine looked at the recorder. At the red light. I'm comfortable with what's true. The woman exchanged a glance with her colleague. Truth has consequences. So does silence, Nadine said. That ended the questioning. They dismissed her without comment. Which was worse. Vincent stood as the men across from him reached their conclusion. We can make this go away, the lead man said. But distance is required. No more appearances. No more intervention. Vincent adjusted his cufflinks. And if I decline? The man's voice stayed smooth. Then you make her a symbol. Symbols attract pressure. Vincent leaned forward slightly. You've already done that. The man studied him. You're choosing complication. Vincent nodded once. I always do. When he stood to leave, the man spoke again. Power remembers slights. Vincent paused at the door. So do I. Nadine exited the building into daylight that felt too bright. Her phone buzzed immediately. Unknown number. They won't stop. Be careful. She knew who it was without asking. She typed back only 3 words. I didn't bend. Several blocks away, Vincent read the message while stepping into traffic without hesitation. For the first time in years, the city felt honest to him, not safer, not kinder, just clear. Lines had been drawn. Loyalty tested. And neither of them had chosen the easy side. The warning arrived too late to feel useful. Nadine noticed the car before she noticed the fear. A silver sedan, parked where it hadn't been an hour earlier. Engine off. Windows tinted too dark for regulations. It wasn't following her. It didn't need to. It was waiting. She didn't change her pace. That was the first choice. Inside the terminal, sound swallowed her, rolling suitcases, boarding calls, the hollow echo of announcements repeating themselves until they meant nothing. She merged into the current, bought coffee she didn't want, stood where cameras overlapped. The sedan didn't move. When her phone vibrated, she didn't look at it immediately. She finished stirring the coffee. Set the lid. Then glanced down. Leave. Now. Don't go home. No name. No explanation. She typed back with one hand. Where? The reply came slower than she liked. Service corridor. Gate level. 2 minutes. Nadine turned toward the employee-only door as if it were routine. Badge swipe. Green light. The corridor smelled of cleaning chemicals and stale air. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too loud in the quiet. She counted her steps. At 27, she heard footsteps behind her. Not hurried. Not careless. Measured. She didn't turn around. The footsteps stopped when she did. Silence stretched. Then a voice, male, calm, practiced. Miss Calder. We just want to talk. Her fingers tightened around her phone. You picked a strange place. You picked it, the voice replied. We followed. That answered everything. Nadine turned slowly. 2 men. Not dressed alike. Not trying to look threatening. One held his hands open, palms visible. The other stood half a step back, eyes already scanning the corridor exits. You've been saying things, the first man continued. Creating noise. I answered questions, Nadine said. Questions that didn't require your opinion. She lifted her chin. Truth doesn't need permission. The second man smiled faintly at that. Not amused. Appraising. This doesn't have to escalate, the first said. You can clarify. Retract. We file it as confusion. And if I don't? The man's gaze dropped briefly to her wrist, where her pulse betrayed her calm. Then misunderstandings multiply. Before Nadine could respond, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then footsteps again, this time heavier, faster. The men turned just as Vincent came around the corner, jacket unbuttoned, expression unreadable. The corridor changed temperature. "Gentlemen," Vincent said, voice quiet. "You're early." The first man straightened. "This is an internal matter." Vincent stepped between him and Nadine without looking back. Everything becomes external when you corner the wrong person. The second man shifted his weight. "You weren't invited." Vincent smiled thinly. "Neither were you." Security alarms began to chirp somewhere distant, minor, controlled, deliberate. Vincent leaned slightly toward the first man. "You have 30 seconds to decide how this ends." "What are you threatening?" the man asked. Vincent glanced at the cameras overhead. Nothing that would show. They left. Not quickly. Not angrily. Carefully. When the corridor was empty again, the lights steadied. Nadine exhaled for the first time in what felt like minutes. Vincent turned to her then. Really looked at her. "They moved faster than I expected," he said. "So did you." "That's because," Vincent replied, "they decided you were easier than me." Nadine wiped her palms against her coat. "Am I?" Vincent held her gaze. "No, but you are more dangerous." She almost laughed at that. Almost. Instead, she asked, "What happens now?" Vincent glanced down the corridor where the men had disappeared. "Now they stop asking. And start doing?" "Yes." Silence settled between them, heavy charged. Nadine broke it. "You didn't have to come." Vincent's jaw tightened. "I know." That answer carried weight. Outside the corridor, the airport continued as if nothing had happened. Flights boarding. Children crying. Lives moving forward unaware. But something had shifted. Not loudly. Not visibly. The kind of shift that only announced itself when it was already too late to step back. And somewhere beyond the walls, plans were being rewritten, with her name no longer a footnote, but a problem. They didn't go back to the airport. Vincent drove until the city thinned, until the buildings lost their names and the roads stopped pretending they were neutral. A safe house waited at the edge of an old industrial strip, brick, boarded windows, nothing that suggested protection except how little attention it drew. Inside, the air smelled like dust and oil. One table. 2 chairs. A single lamp. Nadine stood just inside the door, scanning corners, exits, shadows. When she finally set her bag down, it sounded too loud. "So this is what protection looks like," she said. Vincent locked the door. Checked it twice. "This is what time looks like." "For what?" "For deciding." He set his phone on the table. It vibrated immediately. He didn't pick it up. Nadine noticed. She always noticed. "You're being watched from both sides now," Vincent said. "Your supervisors think you're a liability. My people think you're leverage." "And you?" she asked. Vincent didn't answer right away. He poured water from a bottle into 2 chipped glasses. Pushed one toward her. "I think," he said carefully, "that if I don't move first, someone else will." Nadine didn't drink. "Move how?" Vincent's jaw tightened. "By making an example." The lamp hummed softly between them. "Of me," she said. "Yes." She didn't flinch. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded document, smoothing it on the table. "I already assumed that," she said. "That's why I copied everything." Vincent looked down. Not reports. Records. Dates. Transfers. Names that weren't supposed to connect, but did. "How long?" he asked. "Since the review panel," Nadine replied. "When they asked the wrong questions." "You know what this does," Vincent said. "Yes." "It puts you in direct line of fire." Nadine finally picked up the glass. Took a slow sip. "I've been there since gate 47. At least now I can see it." Vincent studied her. Not the fear, there wasn't much of that left, but the steadiness. The way she didn't ask for reassurance. Didn't ask him what he planned to do. She wasn't waiting to be saved. That changed everything. "My world solves problems permanently," Vincent said. "Once it moves, it doesn't stop halfway." Nadine met his eyes. "Then don't use your world." A sharp, humorless breath escaped him. You think there's another option? I know there is, she said. You just don't like it. Silence pressed in. His phone vibrated again. This time he picked it up. One message. We can clean this tonight. Your call. Vincent set the phone face down. You choose, Nadine said quietly. That's not fair. No, she agreed. It's real. Vincent stood, pacing once, then again. Every step looked controlled. Every pause measured. A man built on decisions that never came back to haunt him until now. If I do nothing, he said, they'll keep pushing. They'll corner you somewhere without cameras. Without witnesses. And if you do something, Nadine replied, you become exactly what they say you are. He stopped moving. That landed. You said earlier, she continued, that power remembers slights. Maybe it's time it remembered restraint. Vincent turned to her slowly. You're asking me to bet everything I've built on a system that's already failed you. I'm asking you, Nadine said, voice steady, to bet on yourself instead of your reputation. Another vibration. Then another. Vincent didn't look. What happens to you, he asked, if this goes public? Nadine didn't answer immediately. She folded the papers back into her bag. I lose my job, she said. My quiet. Any illusion that doing the right thing keeps you safe. And I get to sleep at night. The lamp flickered once. Vincent exhaled slowly. Not defeated. Resigned. He picked up his phone and typed a single message. Stand down. No action tonight. He hit send before he could reconsider. Somewhere, plans dissolved. Somewhere else, someone took note. Nadine watched his face, not relief, not fear, but something like release. You just made enemies, she said. I already had them, Vincent replied. I just changed the rules. A knock sounded at the door. Once. Firm. Deliberate. Vincent's hand went instinctively to the inside of his jacket. Nadine stood as well, not behind him, but beside him. Stay back, he said. No, she replied. If this is the cost, I don't hide. Another knock. Louder. Vincent opened the door a fraction. A young man stood outside. Nervous. Well-dressed. Not dangerous. Message from upstairs, the man said quickly. They're not happy. Vincent nodded. They never are. The man hesitated, then added, they also know she has copies. Nadine felt Vincent go still. That changes things, the messenger continued. You're both exposed now. Tell them, Vincent said evenly, that exposure works both ways. The door closed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Nadine said, they won't forgive this. Vincent looked at her. Really looked at her. I didn't do it for forgiveness. She searched his face. Then why? He answered without hesitation. Because if I crossed that line tonight, there would be no way back. And you would never look at me the same again. That was the truth. Nadine nodded once. Good. Outside, a car engine started. Then another. The night didn't feel calmer. It felt watchful. And somewhere beyond the safe house walls, the consequences of restraint were already unfolding, quietly, relentlessly, closing in on both of them from opposite sides. Morning arrived without permission. Gray light leaked through the boarded windows, thin as a blade. The safe house felt smaller in daylight, less like refuge, more like a place where decisions came to wait out the night and demand answers. Vincent hadn't slept. Neither had Nadine. They sat across from each other at the same table, the lamp now dark, the city waking up beyond the brick walls. Somewhere, trucks backed into loading docks. Somewhere else, people brewed coffee and checked the weather, unaware of how close the lines between ordinary and dangerous had come to blurring completely. Vincent's phone buzzed once. Then stopped. That's the last warning, he said. Nadine didn't ask how he knew. She folded her coat carefully, as if the act itself created order. So what happens when they stop warning and start acting again? Vincent stood and went to the window. He peeled back a corner of the board just enough to look out. A clean street. No cars lingering. No men pretending to be nothing. They won't move the same way, he said. Not after last night. Because you showed restraint? Because restraint confuses people who rely on fear. He let the board fall back into place. They don't know whether I'm done, he continued, or whether I'm planning something worse. Nadine considered that. And you? I'm deciding, Vincent said. She rose and joined him at the window, close enough to feel the heat of his presence, not close enough to touch. The city beyond looked indifferent. It always did. You could still undo this, she said. Distance yourself. Let me take whatever comes. Vincent shook his head once. That option disappeared the moment they followed you into the corridor. Silence pressed in again, different now. Not charged. Settled. I'm going to file, Nadine said. Vincent turned to her. Publicly? Yes. That will accelerate everything. I know. He studied her face. No tremor. No hesitation. Just resolve sharpened by exhaustion. You'll lose protection, he said. From them. From me. Nadine met his gaze. I'm not asking you to protect me. I'm asking you not to erase me. That landed harder than any threat. Vincent reached into his jacket and pulled out a small key. Set it on the table between them. Storage unit, he said. Documents. Accounts. Names I never planned to hand to anyone. Nadine stared at the key. Why are you giving me this? Because if something happens to me, Vincent replied, power shouldn't be the only thing that survives. She didn't touch the key. You're putting your future in my hands. No, he said quietly. I'm putting my conscience there. The city outside grew louder. Traffic thickened. Time resumed its pace. Nadine finally picked up the key, closed her fingers around it. Once I walk out that door, she said, this becomes real. No safe houses. No corridors. Vincent nodded. I know. She took a breath, then another. When she stepped past him toward the door, he spoke. Nadine. She turned. If you disappear, he said, they win. She studied him for a long moment. Then she shook her head. No, she said. If I disappear, they stay the same. She opened the door. Light flooded in. For a second, Vincent saw her framed there, ordinary, unarmored, carrying something far more dangerous than fear. Then she was gone. Vincent remained in the safe house as the city fully woke. He didn't chase. He didn't call anyone. He sat back down at the table and finally allowed himself to feel the weight of what he'd done, not regret, not relief, but something unfamiliar. Alignment. Outside, somewhere between institutions and shadows, Nadine walked into a world that would test whether truth could survive pressure. Inside, Vincent waited to see which kind of man history would decide he'd been. Neither of them knew how this would end. Only that it had already begun.